gonna welcome you all to the next session of the Grow Big Red series. My name's Nicole Stoner. I'm a horticulture educator in Gage County. David and I are the presenters today, and David's going to start the presentation. So I'll let him start, introduce himself while I get the program shared here.
Hey, I'm David Lott. I'm the horticulture educator in Lincoln, Logan, and McPherson County unit, and I am based in North Platte. So roses are a very popular topic each and every year. And so we're going to go over a very quick course in an hour's time over the basic things of rose care and rose types. So we hope you have plenty of questions. Please put them in the chat box and our wranglers will catch your questions and answer them for you. So the first thing on roses is we're going to go out, we're going to go look at someone's roses, or we're at a retail center and we see something, and that's going to be that knee-jerk reaction of go and buy. Well, that's exactly what retail wants you to do, but we need to be setting up the site selection first so we have a place for those roses to thrive. And so we're going to talk about site selection first. So Nicole, okay. So first one is light. And people tend to want to, as I say, cheat, trying to tuck them in places that are too shady. So the absolute minimum is 6 hours of full sun. And we really need 8 to really help those roses out. And so you need to watch where your light is coming from in the morning, midday, and the evening, and watch those patterns and the shade impact. And so this is a picture from K-State Research and Extension that explains the different levels of light and watching the sun throughout the day and where that shadow is cast. And that could make a big difference on whether your rose is going to get enough light or not. Okay, next slide, please. So soil quality. This is an old saying, and so the inflation has made it worse. But don't put $25 plants in 25-cent holes. This is like going out and buying fish at the pet shop without setting up the aquarium. You need to set up your soil first, ideally, to get it ready to do what it needs to do. So we need to get that area opened up where we have the nice light. You need to mix open that soil. What is the texture like? It really needs to be well drained. It needs to have some good soil nutrient baseline. So getting your soil tested is also important so you can find out what nutrients it really needs before we just start feeding it fertilizer. So as we amend soils, especially in this case is an area that just had sod on it, you need to open it up and you need to start mixing in organic matter. So you can buy the compost, whether it's natural or you can buy it bagged at a garden center. You can also use composted or rotted hay and straw is also really good. That breaks that soil structure up or it helps it. So if you have a high clay content, that breaks down that heavy clay structure for the roots to move and for nutrients to pass through and nutrients to be available. So that's really helpful on the clay side. But if you're on a sandy side, you don't have any moisture or nutrient holding capacity, you need to add that in. And so you're going to build up the water and nutrient holding capacity of soils that way. Also, the microbial content of the soil will be improved by adding that organic matter. Now, some people will ask, even especially in the rural areas, about manure. So it's very important that we have aged manure first. So it needs to break down for a solid year. And then we need to be mixing it in with some compost. We don't want to put straight manure necessarily, especially if it's like poultry litter that has quite a bit of ammonia in it or rabbit manure. So be very careful of that. So next slide, please. Irrigation. The biggest thing is to have consistent moisture for your roses. You don't want to go where you let things dry out terribly bad or have too much. So it's always a good idea to keep that soil evenly moist. It's important to avoid overhead irrigation because of moving bacteria that can lead and promote uh, foliar problems. So Nicole's going to talk about that. Ideally, it's best to water at the base of the plant if you're using just a slow trickle from your garden hose, or if you're using soaker hoses. You can put soaker hoses around the roses. The recommendation on soaker is no more than 150 feet in length. So you want a continuous flow of water from the beginning of that hose clear to the tail, so the end doesn't get gypped out of a water supply. Drip irrigation is very nice because you can literally set it up where your emitters are right by the rows that you want it to water to, or you can put the spaghetti tubes in to pinpoint irrigate. It's really great. And also you can use it in combination with mulch, where you are putting the drip line down or the sucker hose down, and you're protecting it with the mulch to help keep it from being damaged or by the sun or by mechanical damage. So it's a great thing to use. Okay, next slide. So we're going to talk about mulch and the benefit of it. It reduces moisture loss. It moderates your soil temperature from the big swings. It helps keep your moisture levels more consistent. And it helps keep the mowers and the weed eaters away. So we worry about that with trees and shrubs, but we also should worry about that with roses as well. We do not want to damage those canes by getting too close. And of course, grass is going to be competition to the rose, as well as a real big mess to clean out if you do have grass around the rose plants. So the best thing is to use organic mulch, meaning different types of shredded organic mulch that you have available to you, preferably no more than 2 inches deep, because you don't want to cut off the oxygen and carbon dioxide cycle that's going through the soil with the root system. And it will be important over time to hydrate and fluff that mulch up over time, because you don't want it to become hydrophobic, meaning if you do water it on top of the mulch, that it just runs off and doesn't sink in. So it's always good to keep that hydrated a little bit and then fluff it up and keep it maintained. We have people that will always ask about rock mulch or grounded tires or other items that are inorganic. So all of those are going to be very hot. They're going to attract a lot of heat. Plus, there's a lot of pressure from their weight. And so that is very tough on the roses, and does shorten the lifespan of the roses. It does help uh, lead to their early demise, in my opinion. So while the roses look good in the rock, and it looks stately, unless you're going to expect them to be short-lived, I would avoid using the rock mulch. Okay, next question, or next slide. Fertilizing, you have lots of options for fertilizer. You can use natural fertilizer, such as the composted manure that's been aged down. You can buy it in bags as well from the retail centers. You can buy fish emulsion, which is in the concentrate. Those are all great sources. And you can buy the inorganic as well. So you can buy the box where you add it into water and you have a suspension, or you can buy the concentrate. Your natural fertilizers have a lower nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium analysis generally, and so they do fade out a little bit more. You may have to do an extra application, so they're not the same in that sense as your inorganic. And apply at label rates. We always are dealing with this question with people that are either gardening or they're raising crops, is to always apply at the label rate, because the label is the law in the state of Nebraska, and we cannot recommend over applying at this level. So if that label's there for a reason. And so if a little bit does good, a lot doesn't do better. So just please follow the label instructions. So it's important to apply 6 inches from the base of the canes go out a little ways, and then make an 18-inch band. And then we need to stop fertilizing by late summer. We do not want to promote new weak growth that's going to get damaged later on in the fall or winter. So we're going to talk about some of the rose types and their functions. And so this is going to be really quick because Nicole has a lot of great information to share with you. So you have three main categories, and this is from Jackson and Perkins, based in Medford, Oregon. They're outside of Portland, very well known for generations for their roses. And so they had a really good description that I wanted to share with you. You have the old garden roses. And so they are talked about as the antiques or the historic ones. Those are the ones that have been around since 1867. And so these have had a huge popular layer of popularity. People really loved them. So we had a question from June about the 18-inch band. So go out 6 inches from the base of the rose and then make a band around that's 18 inches wide around that area to apply the fertilizer, if that helps. Then we have the species roses or our wild roses. These are the ones that you will see out on old farmsteads, or you will see them out in the country in the pastures. And so they have crossed and they do some very interesting hybridization. And have evolved over time, but people will love to go out and look for those as well. And then you have the modern roses. So these are your hybrid teas, your grandifloras, your floribundas are the big three. And so they offer a continuous bloom or a larger bloom, or in the case like the hybrid teas, especially are born on single stems more often than clusters of roses. So it really depends on what you're looking for and the different colors or scent. Scent has become so popular again, but people want to have that old rose scent. So we're going into different types of roses. So it's just a kaleidoscope of fun of choosing something that you'd like. Okay, next slide. So here are the different types of modern roses that you can choose from. And so these are many of them that we see and we talk about and people will ask about. The hybrid tea, which is on a graft. It has the single stems for the most part, sometimes born in clusters. They are highly popular, like Peace or Mr. Lincoln or Tropicana, or extremely popular hybrid tea varieties that have stood the test of time. Then we have grandifloras, which are tall and bushy. They have large clusters of blooms, and so they're good for borders and displays together. So some of that wow factor of these roses blooming in large profusions. Then you have the floribundas, and they're a little shorter than the grandifloras. They are mostly in the clusters. Every once in a while, you'll see grandifloras produce single-stemmed roses, single stems that you can cut. But floribundas are definitely on the clusters. Then you have your climbers that produce the long canes that are going to be beautiful on arches and arbors and pergolas. So they're great for that. They love full sun and they love to spread. You have your miniature roses. We have some people that love miniatures and hedges. And so the hedges do form that more formal setting. You have your shrubs. So you think about think about your knockouts. They are very popular. They're easy care, less maintenance in some ways. So they're good in mass plantings. And then you have your ground colors, which are your low growing ones. They suppress weeds and they're very minimum maintenance compared to the others. Okay. Next slide, please. So your moderns, we talked about that. They should be deadheaded. If you deadhead and prune back, then that helps conserve the energy flow. They're not trying to promote that spent stems And also it'll help initiate blooming. Prune above the 5-leaf cluster and then stop pruning in late summer because you don't want them to keep on promoting and be damaged in the winter or fall and winter. Okay, next slide. There's a picture from the University of Missouri Extension on how to prune those. So you see the cluster of 5, and so you can cut at an angle for that. And Nicole's going to talk about that here very soon. I just wanted to show you that picture. Okay, next slide. The shrubs in the landscape, they don't require the pruning as much. They will promote blooming if you do prune them back, prune out the dead head. It'll improve the appearance so they don't look as shaggy. And the hips, if you allow them to finish out their blooms and they build the rose hips, they actually have some landscape value to them. So some people love doing them. Some people will collect the hips, and some people will actually cook with them to make hip tea or jelly because roses are in the same family as apples and pears. And the next slide. And then your climbers and the rambling roses, and they love the full sun, and they will bloom again. They'll bloom again early in the season. And if you do some pruning, they will come back better. But some of them can be very large, and it's going to be very difficult to climb on top of the pergola to prune out those roses. But they do a fantastic job for you and truly are beautiful. So you have lots of different types of roses to choose from your palette, depending on what you're wanting to use them for. And so this is just a very quick overview. Okay.
Okay. So, moving into the rose maintenance, as David said, deadheading is important. It removes those faded flowers, kind of cleans it up, allows them to possibly rebloom, and give you a little bit more interest through the season. You don't want to deadhead those rugosas or others where you are looking at going for the hips for the display. So you don't want to do that. And then if you remove those spent blossoms, it can help reduce botrytis, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And you don't want to keep deadheading later into the summer so that you can help the plants prepare for winter. So it's like David said, if you do those kinds of things, it could push new growth later in the season, and then that growth would be damaged from winter conditions. So So when we talk about pruning, and David kind of alluded to this, but make sure you're using good equipment for that. And we always recommend to use the bypass pruners rather than the anvil type so that it doesn't damage the tissues behind where you prune that off, and cut at a 45-degree angle, about a quarter of an inch above that outward facing bud. I'll show you that here in the next slide. But basically, when you're pruning out those roses, you're wanting to remove all the dead or dying canes. So those are going to be those shriveled up, dark brown or black canes, and you can usually, you can see a distinct line between like your dead tissue and your live tissue. So you can cut back beyond that to the right point in those canes. That's usually kind of how I wait till it starts to green up in the spring. I have shrub roses. I wait till it starts to green up in the spring, and then I can see where I need to prune out the dead stuff. Um, any thin or weak canes that are pencil size or smaller, you would want to remove those as well. And any sucker growth below that graft union, if you allow that sucker growth from below the graft union on your rose to grow, it's usually you probably have two different colors of roses because you'll have what's above the graft union will be the color and the growth habit that you're going for. If you prune it below that graft union, or if something comes up from below the graft union, it'll be a different color, usually a different growth habit than what you had before. Sometimes our plants will actually die back in the winter beyond that graft union, and then people call and they say, "Oh, my red rose is white now." And that's what happened. It's only the rootstock that's growing, and you've lost the top growth. When you prune, you want to do that in the spring, early spring. Around here, I usually say in that April timeframe. But really, when you see them start to green up, you can do that but you don't want to prune them again later into the fall. So about August 15th is a pretty good deadline for stopping any pruning or deadheading at that point. So this is what I was talking about. So you want that good 45-degree angle, a nice good cut above the bud here. This second one is a little bit too angular. The third one in the row is a little too low. So you're going below where that bud is. In the fourth one down, it's too high. So then it's harmful, doesn't grow as well from that. And then if you've got two buds on the same spot, doing a nice flat cut like that is a good cut for that one as well. So those shrub roses, like I said, these are the ones I grow. They're going to bloom on that new wood from early summer to frost. If you keep deadheading, they will keep blooming. So just any stems that are killed by winter temperatures. It may get a little crowded in your plant, so then you can remove some of those crowded stems to just open it up. This is when we would want to do heading back cuts. One of my roses gets a little crazy and it gets some very long canes in it. Um, and so I cut those back so that they're not, running into my house and things like that. So doing those heading cuts just to make sure that you're keeping it at the size and shape that you're going for. Um, if you do too much pruning on them, it can reduce that flower production. So just be careful with that. You don't want to remove more than a third of it in a season, except for those knockout roses. You can go back to 12 inches tall, so 12 inches above ground with a knockout rose. So, and those are just a different kind of a shrub rose. They're a line of them that you can have that are a little more disease resistant and um, can be pruned back a little more heavily and stuff like that. So those modern roses, so like our hybrid teas, floribundas, grandifloras, you want to prune out that winter injury once you've removed the winter protection. Because even with the winter protection, which we'll go over here in a minute, they still can have some more winter injury. So we want to remove that winter protection late March through April timeframe, and then prune out anything that's dead after that. Cut about an inch below any dead or brown colored areas and making those good cuts at that point. And like I said, these do have a lot of winter injury. So you may have a little more damage than you want. But if possible, try to remove or leave as much live tissue as you can with these ones just because of how much they'll die back. And then the climbing roses, they don't really need a lot of pruning other than to just get them into the right line so that they're going to stay on those supports. So you might not need to do a ton of pruning with them, but they do often have some pretty severe winter dieback. And so you would want to remove all that dead area, and then prune those dead canes, as soon as the buds start to break. And then other than that, just pruning it to train it onto that support. So um, shouldn't be too much more than just your dead areas and just like a straggler that's going off in left field, which sometimes happens with our roses. So you want to keep it nice looking on that trellis or arbor or whatever you've got it growing on. But that should be pretty minimal other than the dieback. So then we get quite a few diseases. One of the more common ones we see is black spot of roses. And this is where you get black spots on the roses. Usually develop on the leaves or the canes, kind of surrounded by a yellow halo. And it can stunt the growth. It can reduce your flowering. Um, so we'll get this, after a long, wet, warm spring a lot. And so really one of the things you can do, especially early on, if you catch this disease pretty early on, is just prune out the infected areas. Make sure you're looking at the canes because like I said, the spots do develop on the canes as well, but it's going to be a pretty circular black spot on those canes, just like on the leaves. And if it's just on a few leaves, just cut a few leaves off. You want to make sure that you're watering from below the plants. So like David said, with your drip irrigation or your soaker hoses, that's going to be better than overhead irrigation because that's going to lead to more problems with fungal diseases. And then just cleaning up the stuff, the dead leaves and fallen leaves as they are happening during the season. And then especially at the end of the season, get rid of any diseased leaves at that point. You can use a fungicide on these. There's rose fungicides. They're specific for roses. You can use just plain copper, mancozeb, chlorothalonil. Let me try that again. Chlorothalonil is another one you can use for them. So just making sure that if it's getting bad enough, you would want to do this. If you have a problem with black spot year after year after year, you would want to treat before it shows up. So a fungicide doesn't work real well as a cure. Botrytis is when our flower blossoms get kind of moldy, fuzzy, and gray growth on them. This is why, if you remove those flower buds, doing that deadheading, that can help reduce this disease. Just because, as the flowers kind of break down, they're going to hold on to some moisture in there in between those petals and things like that. So that can lead to this. It's not terribly damaging. In some cases, it can cause some cane dieback. But it doesn't look pretty. This isn't what you want your rose plant to look like. So, and it can stunt the growth. So just making sure you're cleaning up those plant parts again. Usually chemical control is not necessary, but watering from below and cleaning things up will help with this one. We've got a couple viral diseases in our roses that are pretty common. This one's rose rosette, spread by a mite, and this one will cause the ends of the branches that are infected to turn kind of a reddish color. Usually all the leaves and all that will turn red. You'll have oftentimes a big growth of thorns. It'll just be very thorny in comparison to the rest of the plant. The branches can become thicker. Unfortunately, with a virus, there is no control. So the best thing is when you start to see this to just get the whole plant out of there so that you're not adding or causing it to spread throughout your roses. I've got a line of 3 in my my landscape. So if I were to get this in one, I'd want to get that out right away so that it doesn't go to the other 2. Um, sorry, got a frog in my throat. But yeah, it's that reddish growth on the end and a lot of thorns. The other virus that we see some is rose mosaic. Actually, David helped me. We were looking at one just a couple weeks ago that found some rose mosaic virus in the area. So it's just going to have weird patterns, weird modeling on the leaves that's not normal. And again, it's a virus, there's no control. So it's best to just remove it as soon as you see these signs of the first signs of these viruses so that you can help to reduce that spread. But if the leaves just look odd, kind of a water soaked, but just that different coloration. The veins here on this one are different colored. That's what that one would look like. So then we get a few insects. I know you guys are all going to know about this one. This here is our friend, the Japanese beetle. Very common. They love roses. Roses and lindens are their 2 main favorite choices of food. So, and I was at my mom's this weekend and I saw some Japanese beetles on her tomatoes. So they're starting to come out again. This is a scarab beetle, nice pretty green with the copper elytra with those white tufts of hair along the sides of the body. But they are pretty voracious, do a lot of feeding pretty quickly, and can be in very high populations in areas. The larvae of this is actually one of our white grub species in the lawn, but treating those can reduce Japanese beetles, but because not everybody's treating for them, you're still going to have Japanese beetles. But they cause that skeletonization of the leaves, will cause defoliation. So one of the things you can do for these, because we're dealing with roses, right? So roses have a lot of pollinators go to them. You see bees, butterflies, all kinds of things around your flowers of your roses. So we may not want to use a lot of insecticides around them. So hand removal can be quite effective. Like I said, I have 3 roses. I could easily go out there and take care of the Japanese beetles found on those roses. That 6 to 7 p.m. time frame is really the best time. I like to say that's when they're having their party or maybe their dinner time. But they're all kind of bunched up on your plants at that time. So you can go out at like that 6:30 with a bucket of soapy water and just tap on the leaves with the bucket underneath of the leaf you're tapping on, and they'll fall in. And because they're all balled up, a whole bunch of them will fall in at a time. And then that soap and water in there will kill the beetles. Um, you can use insecticides. There's a lot of different options, including some organic options like piola, neem oil. But again, you really want to take care to make sure that you're not spraying directly in those flower blossoms if you are. And so that's why I say if we can do some hand removal, if you don't have a lot of roses, I would suggest, your hand removal type options for those. So. Rose slugs are one I get calls on almost every year. This is actually a sawfly larvae, not a true slug. Um, but most of the time people just notice the holes in their leaves. So first it starts as this, they chew the green part from one side of the leaf, and then eventually that papery membrane will fall through and it'll create those shot hole appearance on your leaves. This guy, and he's hard to see, that's why he's so good at his job, but he's translucent green with a brown head. And they're on the underside of the leaves. So, and they're very small, especially when they first get started. So you really have to be at like paying close attention to what you're looking for. But you can find them. I actually was out in my roses last week and I saw some rose slugs. Not too damaging. Really, from these, the damage is very minimal. You still have plenty of leaf space, plenty of area to do the photosynthesis and build sugars and do all of that that the plant needs. So it's not that damaging and you really don't need to control them. Most of the time with these, they're a problem for about 2 weeks in June and then they're moved on. Um, so, if you're seeing them, you can just hand remove them, pull them off, throw them into that bucket of soapy water, pull the whole leaf off. If you get that ick factor with bugs that some people get, just take them and smash them, with your shoe, pull them off, pull that leaf off and smash them. That can work too. Um, but that is one that we get a lot of common questions on. So I was just reading a message from Ian here. So lots of Japanese beetles on his roses. Yeah, they do like those. So, all right. So another one. And so this one, David and I, since we worked on the presentation together, he has more problem with this one than I do. This is Rose Schaefer. So I said I'm in Beatrice, which is southeast Nebraska. We're very clay soils here. These prefer a sandy soil. They like to lay their eggs in that nice sandy soils. So you're going to have more problems with Rose Schaefer on those sandy sites than you do on our southeast Nebraska more clay sites. So that is just something to keep in mind. If you've got a sandy area, you may have more problems with these. They will feed on the flower blossoms, but can be on fruits and trees and shrubs and all kinds of other stuff. They'll cause big irregular holes in the blossoms and in the leaves, but they're really only a problem for a few weeks in June. And you can do hand removal with this guy as well. These beetles, if you pick them up, they're not going to bite you. So just pick them up and throw them into that bucket of soapy water. With the Rose Schaefer, you could use a barrier like a floating row cover. Just make sure you open those up from time to time for a little bit of period of time during the day so that you can get that pollination to occur. Um, and then again, you can use insecticides if you want, but be very careful with those around your blooming plants. And then I had to throw this one in. This is not a bad guy, but this is a common question. This is the leaf cutter bee, one of my favorite bees. They're super cool. But they will feed out on the edge of, and they like roses. They'll not feed, sorry. They chew out this little pretty well circle spot out of the edge of the leaf, and they do like roses. I think Jody talked about them on last month's program on beneficial insects. But they use that leaf fragment when they lay their eggs. So they lay their eggs in a tube and then stuff this leaf fragment in for some food for the larvae as they develop. It's really not harmful to the rose. Usually you don't see a ton. This is this picture is a lot more damage than I usually ever see. It's like a little bit here on this leaf and a little bit here on this leaf, and it's not terribly damaging, but I wouldn't control these because these are a good guy. You want these. They're good pollinator insects. So just wanted to point that out that we do have the holes that develop from leafcutter bees, but it's really not that damaging. All right, and then talking on overwintering the roses. So most of your roses are going to need a little bit of extra support during the winter, a little bit of warmth during the winter here in Nebraska and further north. So those hybrid teas, grandifloras, floribundas, and climbing roses are not as reliably winter hardy here. Now, things like your shrub roses, your old garden roses, the um, um, rugosa rose, those kinds of things are very hardy and are not going to need that winter protection, but they might benefit from a little bit of winter protection. So I could probably reduce the amount of dieback in my shrub rose if I added a little bit of leaves around those plants. So this is the mounding method that some people will use. And so I could do a less exaggerated version of this here. Just pile up your leaves around your plants. You can, with the grandifloras or the floribundas, you probably would want to make sure that that mulch is staying there. So you can mound them up with extra soil during the winter, about 10 to 12 inches deep, or you can also then add that the leaves, loosely packed leaves around there for extra protection. You could use straw in there. So anything like that, but you really want to make sure that that bud union or that graft union is covered so that they don't die back beyond that, so that you can maintain the type of flower that you're going for. So this is one of the ways you can deal with winter. And then another one is the rose cones. And so a lot of people use these. They're a little easier to use. You just have to trim your plants back so that you can get that cone over top of it. And then you may want to mound some soil up around the base so that winter conditions aren't sneaking underneath. And then you just want to help protect those roots from freezing. So these are a few different types of rose cones that I found. So however you want to do that, but just wanting to do something to add that extra, kind of an extra blanket of precaution there. And remember, don't pull those off too soon in the spring. So a lot of people are like, oh, it's warm in February. Let's open up all of our plants because it's warm. Just leave them in there till they're really ready to come out of there. They've had that winter protection all year. And so if you remove that too soon, that will damage the plant even more. So that late March into April is a pretty good time to remove that winter protection. And then the climbing roses are a little more difficult to deal with, but they do bloom on previous year's growth. So you do want to make sure that you're dealing with that so that they don't get damaged, or else it will reduce that bloom for the next year. So you may need to attach a different pole to that trellis and then kind of untie the canes from the trellis and securely tie them to that pole, and then wrap them in burlap and then fill it with some straw or leaves. And then you can protect the base of the plant with a little extra soil, just like you would in those hybrid teas or the grandifloras. Another way is you can remove the canes from the trellis and just bury them in a shallow trench, cover with a little bit of soil and then a blanket of leaves, and that should help those get through. You could probably decorate these like a Christmas lollipop. Is kind of what it looks like to me. So that might be fun for you, but just wanting to protect those through the winter months. So, okay, I had plenty of time for questions here. So I'll leave this up here. This is our QR code and our link for the survey. So if you have time, we'd appreciate you filling out the survey. So,
And then these are some of the references of the sources that we used for the presentation today. So if you'd like any of them, the one on shade is very interesting. That was written by K-State in Johnson County, which is Olathe and the Kansas City suburbs. That's a great one to use when you think about, do you have enough light for things to thrive when you're pairing the plant with the light needs where you want it?
Thank you, everybody. I am putting in the chat. That is our YouTube channel, where you can go back and watch any of the previous Grow Big Reds. We do have a nice selection for you to take a look at. This one will be posted in probably a week or two. But otherwise, uh, don't forget to join us for August 13th, 12 p.m. Central Daylight Time. John's going to be talking about turf and all things grass. So thank you, everybody, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Everyone have a
everyone.
great day.